are going to be joined by Ben Tyrrell from Brex and Janice Lee from Helpshift. And it's going to be all about the bot. And I'm fascinated. I wonder where this conversation is going to go. So over to you.
Thanks for having us. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Janice.
So I've been listening to these conversations, so I think this is going to be a fun topic for everyone. Before we get started, let's just do some quick intros. Ben, you go first, and then I'll go after you.
Absolutely. So my name's Ben Tyrrell. I work for a company based out of America called Brex. I am the Director of Customer Experience there, and I oversee a few things at Brex. I oversee our Priority Support org, our onboarding concierge team, CX operations, and then I've also been the main stakeholder driver in the business in rolling out a number of AI initiatives across our support journey.
Yes, to say the least. So, I mean, Brex is a super cool brand. Not sure how many people are familiar. Ben, can you share sort of, who your customers are, what your value prop is to them?
Yeah, so our customers are businesses based in the United States, primarily fast-growing businesses. At one point, this was just startups that had received funding and needed credit card and other products, and now we've expanded to essentially offer our product to most businesses in America. And so our value prop is we bring together all of the various things you might need instead of the financial elements of running your business into one spot. So right now that's credit cards, cash management, and then down the road, I think you can probably appreciate some of the other things that businesses need to run the financial element of their business, and we'll have that under sort of one managed service simplified offering.
Yeah, so for those of us who are in the startup industry like Helpshift, Brex is the cool brand that all the startups use for our financial needs. And that's kind of where you got started, right? But since then, you've expanded your customer base quite a bit beyond startups.
Yeah, so we had this sort of startup persona, and our customers were very technically savvy. They often understood how our technology worked in a way that was a little atypical, which was great. And our support, as you can appreciate, probably the surface area of where they needed support was a little bit different. And that's not the case anymore. I mean, we still have those amazing customers, but now a lot of our customers are small businesses that maybe aren't technology centric, maybe don't have people that are as sort of technologically aware running or working for them. And so the sort of things that our support org has had to adopt and adapt to after the last year has been quite interesting. We've seen a lot more what we thought were traditionally basic questions come in, and that's done a whole variety of things. It's driven our contact rate up. It's caused some channel shifting. It's caused different spikes in when the volume arrives over the course of the day, and we've had to adapt pretty quickly to that.
Yeah, look forward to diving into that piece. So, when we think about the sort of how the world's changing and how consumers are evolving, that's kind of where Helpshift got its start. And my role at Helpshift is I run product and marketing, and that includes the design team as well. So we work very closely with partners of ours such as Brex and Square and other banks who are financial institutions who are thinking about reaching their consumers, their customers on the mobile device. And we believe that that's where the world is going, or that's where the world has been, in fact, since the explosion of the app economy, which started in 2008 when Apple introduced the App Store. And we all started using our mobile devices as a primary means of interacting, communicating, playing. So, we've been really excited to be partnering with Brex, who I would say in many respects has been at the forefront of thinking of how this new communications medium plays into how you deliver customer service. So before we get into that, I just wanted to get out a question for the audience, Samuel, if you don't mind. Question number one is, what is your role? Just would love to know who's in the audience and what kind of lens you're listening from. For Helpshift, we interact with heads of customer service for sure, heads of product, and that includes product managers, product owners, and designers. And that's because the idea of how you deliver a help experience to your users has become more and more integral into the product itself, especially when the product is a mobile app. So thank you for taking the poll. We'd love to see sort of that makeup. Yeah, so we've got a good mix here. So we've got product design, half customer service, and other. Okay. So let's dive in, Ben, because I think there's probably some questions that we all have around how do we think about customer service, how it's changed over the last year, of course, with the pandemic, and then how do we come out of it? What do we need to do differently going forward? So let's talk first about how customer service has changed. And for your particular consumers, Ben, how are the patterns changing?
Well, I mean, I think the most prominent one, and this is interesting because a year ago we sat down and we said, like, we have a deliberate strategy here to sort of like gently guide our customers towards channels that we know we can provide better service, and that channel is inevitably chat, right? There's a history of a conversation. We can do ID verification better. Our agents can handle more than one. CSAT was historically higher, and so a year ago we embarked on a strategy to do that in a way that was, supportive of our customers' needs as well. And about a quarter into the pandemic, that initiative was working wildly better than we ever could have imagined, to the point that it was working too well and we actually had to pull the brakes on. So I think when we kind of went into the pandemic, probably about half of our volume was through chat, and now that's sort of 3/4 of our volume. And so that's been really interesting, and I think we've had a lot of sort of hypotheses as why. I think one of the most prominent ones is people are working from home, and there's a baby screaming in the background, or your spouse is using a blender, and you don't want to be on the phone, but you still need immediate support. And so chat is an amazing channel for that. Interestingly, at the same time, we've also found that when we've asked our associates, our specialists to take chat, taking 3 chats concurrently all day leads to a lot of exhaustion and burnout. So we've had to recalibrate how we staff and structure and sort of support the team when they're dealing with, in some cases they're probably talking to 3 times as many customers as they would if they were simply talking on the phone. So it's been a really interesting shift for us. I wonder what's going to happen after the pandemic. I wonder if it's going to go back to how it was. I suspect probably a little bit, but not too much. My hope is that now that our customers have seen how effective chat is as a delivery channel for support, that they stay with it, and that I think obviously allows us to do a lot more for them in terms of a better customer experience, but I think also allows us to do a lot more in terms of servicing more customers at the same time.
Yeah, well, so when we look across all industries, because at HelpShift we get to see across many industries. One of the industries that we serve quite well is actually gaming, and during the pandemic, we certainly saw similar patterns, which is people were not leaving the house. However, they actually spent an hour more each day on their mobile devices, even though they were sitting on their couches. And as a result of that, we saw more and more interactions shifting over to chat, and for the very reasons that you said, which is, you've got a lot of distractions at home. Even if you tried to call customer service when you need help, customer service was really experiencing extended wait times, especially for service providers who were experiencing heavy loads. Think about your internet connectivity at home. Think about all your banking needs, right? Because people couldn't go to the bank. Everyone started to move towards online and mobile banking. And so, we saw those behaviors start to drive new adoption of maybe ways of interacting that some consumers may not have preferred in the past, but certainly started to prefer during the pandemic. And, one of the things that when HelpShift looked at this market and we said, what is the best channel for delivering customer service to today's consumers? And knowing that, mobile apps were going to be the place where most people interact, we started with what's called asynchronous messaging. And what that means is this ability to interact in an asynchronous way that doesn't require you to sit there and wait for somebody to respond. And that's the experience that you get today if you're on the web. So if I were to go to, any website and I want to chat with an agent, I'm literally in a session. So it feels, as a user, it feels like I'm actually on digital hold if that agent isn't available live. So I may not be on the phone on hold, but I'm certainly on digital hold. And that's not preferred for most people who are mobile natives or mobile first. They want to interact on their own time. And if that means, every 30 seconds or you've got 1 or 2 minutes in between, that's okay, because they're multitasking, they're doing other things. So when we look at chat, that's because of the work patterns and the at-home patterns that became predominant. But the thing that also opens up when you think about asynchronous communications for customer service is that it makes room for automation, because you cannot automate a phone call. You cannot automate an email interaction. You cannot automate live chat, but you can automate asynchronous chat. And so that's where I think a lot of this gets unlocked, is how do you take advantage of that now preferred form of communication to automate the things that you can. So Ben, you talked about user preferences sort of changing. For your customer service team, having to work from home, maybe even adjusting to sort of consumer usage, because one of the things that we did see is a lot of the help started to shift from the weekends to the weekdays, because people were at home and they're not sort of being observed. So even when they're working, they're not always working. They're sort of going about their own lives. And a lot of times that requires them to get help for personal things, for banking and financial services. So did your customer service team have to adapt to any of those changing patterns?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have so much growth that it's hard to say if it was the pandemic, if it was our growth that caused the arrival patterns to change. We see very heavy volume in the mornings now, and that wasn't always the case. And maybe that's a product of us moving from a traditionally West Coast customer base to more across the entire country. Maybe it's something else that was hard to say. It has the work from home has certainly led to a measure of isolation for all of our specialists. So when those spikes in demand were happening, it took it would be our real-time analyst team that would have to communicate that outward. Where in the past, if everybody was on the floor and things got busy, everybody would know things are busy and not go to coffee break or whatever and kind of be together. So there's been some interesting changes in working pattern that we've had to support there.
And you said something kind of interesting about your teams, because before, when they were in the office, you had them kind of dispersed across multiple sites, right?
Yeah. And so we have support operations right now in 3 centers in North Carolina, in Salt Lake City, and in Vancouver. And prior to the pandemic, it was very much the Vancouver team and the Salt Lake City team and at that time we did have North Carolina, but there was definitely a palatable feeling of different teams. And everybody obviously would work together and there was very little tension, but it was clear that, you were one of those buckets. Now that we're work from home, those buckets are gone. I mean, everybody is a face on a Zoom meeting, whether you're in the head office or a satellite office or elsewhere. And that's led to a really positive change in how our team works together and how our team supports each other and how our team learns from each other, that I would never, intuitively, I think you could kind of perceive that the pandemic might drive this, but I would never have guessed that this would be a positive side effect of the pandemic. So I've got a much more integrated team now than we ever had prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, let's see if that sticks.
Well, we're remote first forever now. So I mean, we may have offices that people can go to as a perk, but this new normal working, I think we've got to wholeheartedly embrace it, and I really do hope it sticks after the pandemic, because it's been quite positive.
Yeah. I want to double click on this concept of an integrated team in a second. Before we let's shift gears to automation. Before we get there, just another question for the audience. Do you have a mobile initiative? So yes, you've already got mobile apps up and running, know what you're starting, or no, you don't have any plans. And I think this is, a good test to see. I heard some conversations in the previous session about modernizing and modern thinking and sort of breaking away from the traditional way we do things. Going mobile certainly is one of those places where a lot of modern financial services institutions are definitely venturing from our perspective. All right, thank you for answering the question. Okay. Yes, have mobile apps. Okay, 70%. Still 6%, no plans. Okay. Let's talk about automation, Ben.
Yeah.
So integrated team. I'm kind of gonna use that to open up the conversation around how customer service teams work together when automation is at play. Because one of the questions that you probably get often is, what is the role of bots versus agents? So if you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about how your bot and automation journey started? Where did you start?
Yeah. And so one of the things I've learned is that this sort of bot and automation journey isn't like a binary thing. It's not like you go from not being an not enabled AI enabled business to an AI enabled business, right? So there's these sort of gradual steps or chapters that you have in that journey, and Brex was no different. I mean, when I joined the business 2 years ago, I don't think the business was sold that deploying AI into our customer experience journey was necessarily the right decision. I think people were reluctant that we, have a bot that just frustrated our customers or make consistent errors and that sort of thing. And so, I think the first thing that we needed to do was make sure that the business saw the potential here. And that's a socializing journey with stakeholders in various teams, not just even customer support, to make sure that expectations are properly managed, everyone knows what to expect, and everyone kind of knows what the journey will be. And so once we completed that, we wanted to start in a way that would allow us to learn as much as possible, train our AI models as much as possible, but introduce as little friction to the customer. And so we deployed a solution that allows us to do that without introducing friction. So currently, if you go and talk to the Brex bot, the moment it gets confused, it'll pass off to a human. And we've been slowly just turning that, I'll call it the friction dial, to use a term that somebody in the previous presentation used. We've been slowly turning that friction up to try and see what the sweet spot is between good containment, capturing our customers' issues and solving them, and deflecting volume from our support team, and also providing the best possible customer experience. And as SLAs have gotten spiky at certain times of the day, like we've noticed that having that bot deployed really, really helps us stay ahead of that journey. And the second thing I'd say is we really do need to make sure that the business understands what you want to accomplish before you get started. And so we had to be pretty deliberate about what are the things that we're trying to meaningfully improve? What is an acceptable containment rate? What potential hit are we willing to take on CSAT, for example, by having this? And so I had to get everybody aligned on that before we got started.
Yeah, speaking of containment, one of the trends that has certainly occurred during the pandemic is this concept of right channeling, which is, because we've got this increase in volume, and because we've maybe don't have the same capacity that we do on a customer service team, thanks to people working remotely. The idea of shifting as much as you can to self-service, that certainly happened from what we could see. And the question we often got was, well, does automation apply to even the self-service experience? Or does it apply after the self-service experience, when the self-service experience hasn't actually delivered the proper resolution?
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of look at, if you map like a support journey out, you've kind of got all the various stages that something kind of can end up not going to a human before you finally get to the human. And, I think you classically have the funnel, and the first spot on that funnel is what you can deflect to some sort of help center, right? Knowledge base. There is definitely some smart ways of making a help center better than simply a website with a bunch of pages. We've looked at that a little bit, and what sort of creative issue as resolution looks like in that flow. We haven't deployed anything yet, but I think there's definitely something there. For us, we estimate maybe a quarter of our volume can go to a help center and actually be resolved. So meaningful, but not super huge. And then, of course, as you get further down the funnel, you've got a chatbot deflecting things, and then you've kind of got, when you finally, if the agent is finally accepting a call, you've got all the AI you can supply to the agent to allow them to handle the call better. So we've kind of broken things down in that way, but I think there is definitely some opportunity at that sort of first stage, that first node, to deploy automation in a way much more intelligent than, as I say, like a simple website with pages.
Yeah. So where would you say that, what is the customer service use case for which you think automation performs the best?
Actually, I think it depends. It depends on the customer. It depends on the problem. We have automation deployed in a few places. We have sort of the chatbot. We have sort of this agent enhancement product. I think the quickest gains that we realized through some sort of chat augmentation, honestly. I mean, and this is where you're going to see, 10-20% containment rate pretty quick, which is a very clear ROI from the very beginning. With our we call it an agent enhancement platform, where we're using natural language processing to listen in real time to conversations and then proactively prompt the agent on how to handle the conversation. That one's a lot harder for us to measure. We've seen average handle time go down, but maybe it's because of that. Maybe it's because we better trained agents. Maybe it's something else. But the chatbot use case, I think, is like, if I was gonna pick one thing to invest in, I think that's the first place I would start.
Yeah, and what do your chatbots do that sort of buy you some of that time back, or speed up at least the time to first response or a handoff to an agent? Is it information collecting?
We try and fully contain the issue, so fully resolve it for them. If we can't, there is this element of issue collection. So make sure that if the conversation does end up with an agent, the 3 or 4 questions the agent always has to ask are already answered, and then they can kind of look through the history and handle it there. So there is a sort of average handle time improvement as well.
And would you say that you can typically save the customer frustration, so when your agents actually get connected, they're not having to repeat the same questions?
Well, that's the goal. And in most cases, we can get that working. I think where there's still friction we've seen this more as we've moved into a different business market segment, with the small business segment. There are people that just have an allergic reaction to feeling like they're interacting with a robot, and will do everything they can to just circumvent those paths. And I think we haven't really figured out how to make sure we service those people the best way possible. I mean, they'll ask some questions, but if they think it's the robot asking, they'll just kind of say something to kind of forego them. So we haven't really figured out that for them. But yeah, I think in most cases, we're able to sort of mitigate a fair bit of frustration and actually get the issue resolved quicker.
Yeah, and it is not just about that. It's also this idea of being always on. How have you benefited from that at all, in terms of having chatbots engage, 24/7, always on, and has that created an advantage for you during the pandemic, where you may not have the agent capacity, or you may not even have agents available during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for certainly, there's that group that just the chatbot will answer their question right away, and then there's the group that maybe we don't have an answer to their question, but we can collect some information so that when we get back to them, we can provide them with appropriate information, and so we're able to sort of collect some data at that point and then respond. So yeah, it certainly improves sort of our after hours coverage significantly. I think ideally that is sort of one of these promises of the chatbot. When there's spiky SLA volume and there's a long wait, the chatbot should resolve the issue, and then also when there's sort of after hour needs. So that's in addition to the containment challenge and improving agent efficiency, there's just this improved customer experience we get by having something that's always able to respond at a moment's notice.
Yeah. So let's talk about what happens next. If you had a crystal ball and you said, okay, by the end of this year, these things will remain the same and these things will change, what do you think that would be in terms of maybe your user patterns, or your...
Yeah, so I mean, email is a great channel for one reason, and that's because somebody can pick up their device and they send something off and they don't have to worry about it and they get a response. It's a horrible channel for many, many reasons. It's a horrible channel for security. It's a horrible channel for ID verification. It's a horrible channel to solve something in real time. Average handle time for us is very high with email, and CSAT is lower. And so I think there's a future where that is a less and less common support channel, and largely driven by the need to go to chat. I think phone for a business like ours, we're a financial institution, I think there's always going to need to be a component of that. But I suspect email is very close to being something that can be fully deprecated for a lot of customers, which is great. I think we're going to see obviously a bigger shift towards AI. I think there's sort of this sweet spot in how, so you've got your classic chatbot that's listening to somebody type, and then you sort of got this sort of guided experience, which is, either typing or sort of some sort of guided flow. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. We've certainly seen a lot of potential with solutions like that at Brex. And so I think there's like a more intelligent design we're not just having a chat conversation, but we really control the presentation layer in this little window, and how do we use different design patterns to show information to kind of guide users to be productive and that sort of thing. And I think we'll see a lot more sort of intelligent deployment of that over the next little while as well.
Speaking of intelligence, we got a question from the audience. First, about sort of how your journey got started with AI. Was it originally driven by cost or by customer experience needs?
Good question. So both. I think to justify it to the business, there obviously was an ROI we had to provide. But I think this is something Brex has been very passionate about, is making sure that we have the best possible customer experience, and so that was also a consideration, and that's why we ultimately deployed a very low friction approach to our chatbot solution to start. So a bit of both. I mean, the ROI case was extremely compelling, just in and of itself. Fortunately for us, there was also a good customer experience case behind it.
Right, if done right.
If done right, exactly. It needs to be done right.
Yeah, so speaking of done right, next question is, what is the biggest risk with automating so much of your contact center?
Yeah, so I mean, I use this analogy a lot because Brex has kind of gone from a small support org to a moderate sized one, is you sort of have these different stages of the journey, right? First you're flying a plane and it's a Cessna, and you can see out the window and you can see the ground and you know what's going on, and then you got to fly that plane by dials, and then you're having to orchestrate multiple planes you're flying just by the dials. And I think if you don't have the right instrumentation and listing set up, you do risk missing something. You do risk customers getting frustrated, and instead of talking to you, putting it on Twitter. You do risk perhaps a problem they identified that doesn't get surfaced properly. So really, really, really important to keep the instrumentation strong. For me, what I actually did was I sampled every contained chat for a few weeks myself and saw what was going on and made sure that what was happening was what we expected. But you do risk a little bit of visibility if you automate too much.
Yeah, well, I actually think that ties nicely to, one of the design principles that many of us have or put into practice as, the providers of customer experience, which is this constant discovery, constant validation of the user experience to make sure that, you're designing it as your users' needs evolve. So thanks for that. We're, I think, at the bottom of the hour and our time is up, but just want to thank you, Ben, again, for having this conversation with us. Thanks to the audience for the questions. And, you can figure out where to reach us in cyberspace if you've got more.
Thanks, Janice.
Thanks, Janice. Thanks, Ben. We do have a couple of minutes before we move off to the next area in terms of, so Ben, if you're around, I've got one question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to.
So, and then we'll just cover the housekeeping for the next part of it, which is starting relatively soon. So, Ben, thanks for taking the time to be a part of the event today. I'm going to go back to a comment you made about 20 minutes ago, where you said you went from chat volume that was predicted at one level to then 50%, then 75%, then you had to put the brakes on. Two questions really. How did you put the brakes on and what was the output? What was the outcome of that? Because I would have thought that many brands would think, I would love that level of engagement and they would want to put the brakes on. So
yeah, I mean, we do. It's just the business, like we figured we'd get to 60% and like orchestrated team and staffing and everything to support that, and then all of a sudden we're going above that, and there's some smoke coming out of some specialist ears. So a lot of the things, there's always an opportunity to sort of passively guide, I think, customers to different channels. And one of the elements of our business is we have a certain amount of outbound communication we have to send to customers to get them to do something with their account, request statements, that sort of thing. And so in those communications, we, at one point said, just respond to us by email and do X and Y, and we changed that to chatting with us. And that was a very effective lever for us to pull. So we just rolled that back and was able to kind of slow it down. We've gone back now to sort of all levers on, get everybody to chat, which has been great.
Okay, yeah.
Now that we finally have figured out, okay, how do we make sure our specialists aren't burnt out? How do we make sure that our customer our SLAs are being hit? All those sort of things. Now that we finally able to hit those, we've kind of turned the dial back up.
Okay. So as successful as it was, you recognized that there was an opportunity to improve it rather than actually having sort of a poor customer outcome, poor customer experience by this wonderful channel that has been so effective for you.
Exactly. I mean, we hadn't necessarily staffed the team for the arrival patterns of chat and all this sort of thing. So we had to kind of calibrate those and then move forward.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Ben. That was literally my one question, although I guess there were two questions there. So thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Janice. Thank you.